He said he just needed a shirt, but stayed to talk all night in mine. There are nights that slip through your memory like sand through fingers. Too unremarkable, too ordinary to ever be remembered. And then there are nights that stay with you forever. Nights that you could recite detail by detail even years later, as if they've been branded into the walls of your heart. This is the story of one of those nights. Started with something simple, him knocking on my door. It was late, past 11, and I wasn't expecting anyone. My apartment wasn't the kind of place people dropped by unannounced. I wasn't exactly the social butterfly of our friend group. Most nights, I was the one left behind, pretending not to mind the silence. But that night, the knock was soft, hesitant. I opened the door, and there he was, Daniel. We weren't strangers, but we weren't close either. He lived a floor above me, a friend of a friend, the kind of guy you exchange quick hellos with in the hallway but never more. He was the type everyone seemed to notice, warm, open, the kind of presence that drew people in without him ever trying. And me? I was the opposite. Quiet, careful, always thinking twice before saying anything at all. So when he stood at my door, hair slightly damp from the drizzle outside, wearing nothing but a wrinkled t-shirt and joggers, my first thought was, he must be lost. "Hey," he said, his voice soft, almost apologetic. "This is weird, but do you have a shirt I could borrow? Just for tonight." I blinked at him, confused. "A shirt?" He gave a sheepish laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, mine got soaked earlier and I don't have a clean one. Laundry disaster. Long story. It was such a small request. Just a shirt. And yet, the way his eyes lingered on me, as if he wasn't sure I'd even let him in, did something strange to my chest. Yeah, sure," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." He hesitated, then crossed the threshold. His presence filled the small apartment immediately. It was the kind of place I never invited people into, just one bedroom. A couch that sagged in the middle, and shelves stacked with books I pretended I'd read. I felt suddenly self-conscious, aware of every corner that screamed lonely bachelor existence. I rummaged through my closet, pulling out an old soft cotton shirt, one of those that always felt better after years of wearing. I handed it to him. "Here." His fingers brushed mine as he took it. "Thanks, man. You're a lifesaver." I expected him to leave then. That was what people did. They came, got what they needed, and left. But Daniel didn't move toward the door. Instead, he looked around, then back at me. "You mind if I sit for a bit? I don't really feel like going back upstairs yet." Something about the way he asked, like he needed me to say yes, made it impossible to say no. "Sure," I said, gesturing to the couch. So he sat. And then, somehow, we talked. It started with small things. Neighbors, work, the city we both swore we'd move away from someday but never did. He had this way of speaking that felt easy, unguarded, like the words just flowed out of him. I found myself laughing at stories I didn't expect to find funny, leaning in without realizing it. And the strangest thing was, he listened, really listened. When I spoke, his eyes stayed on me, steady and unflinching, as if my quiet little thoughts were worth something. Hours passed without us noticing. Midnight came and went, the rain outside turning into a steady rhythm against the window. He tucked his legs up on the couch, wearing my shirt now, and it looked good on him. Too good. There was a moment, small but seismic, when our laughter died down, and silence filled the room. His gaze lingered on me a second longer than it should have. My heart stuttered, and I looked away, afraid of what he might see written on my face. But then he spoke, voice softer than before. "You ever feel like everyone thinks you're fine, but you're not? Like you spend all day putting on this act, and no one notices?" The question cut through me. I knew that feeling too well. "Yeah," I whispered. "All the time." He exhaled, as if my answer was the confirmation he'd been waiting for. And then, he told me things I never expected. About how lonely he'd been lately, even surrounded by people. About the weight he carried that no one else seemed to see. And I told him things too. Things I hadn't told anyone. It was strange, how easy it was to be honest at 2 in the morning. sitting across from someone you never thought you'd confide in. Maybe it was the rain. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was just him. At one point, his hand brushed against mine on the couch. Neither of us moved it away. Time blurred after that. The night stretched on, not in the way where you're counting minutes, but in the way you wish it would never end. By the time we realized it was nearly dawn, the sky was pale blue, and the world outside was waking up. He looked at me, eyes tired but gentle. "I should probably go," he said, though he didn't move. "Yeah," I replied, though I didn't want him to. He stood slowly, hesitating by the door. My shirt hung loose on his frame, the fabric carrying the warmth of the night we'd just shared. "Thanks," he said softly, "for the shirt, for everything." And then he was gone, leaving me standing in the silence, heart racing with something I couldn't quite name. I didn't know it then, but that night, just a shirt, just a conversation, was the start of something that would change both of us. Something I would come to both ache for and treasure, long after it was gone. The morning after was brutal. Not because I had a hangover or because anything particularly bad had happened. No, it was brutal because everything felt different, and I didn't know what to do with that difference. I woke up late, sunlight spilling across my small bedroom, my head foggy from lack of sleep, and the first thing I thought about wasn't the work emails piling up in my inbox or the errands I had to run. It was Daniel. Daniel, sitting on my couch in the quiet glow of a lamp. Daniel, in my shirt, leaning in as if every word I said mattered. Daniel, leaving at dawn, pausing at the door like he wanted to say something but didn't. It shouldn't have felt like a big deal. People talk. Neighbors sometimes hang out. Friends borrow shirts all the time. But I couldn't shake it. The echo of his presence lingered in the apartment like the faint trace of cologne you catch long after someone's gone. The whole day, I kept replaying the night in my head. The laughter, the confessions, the way his hand brushed against mine and didn't move away. Was that an accident? Did it mean something? Or was I just desperate enough for connection that I was twisting simple gestures into something bigger? By the time evening rolled around, I was restless. I kept glancing toward the ceiling, knowing he was just one floor above me, wondering if he was thinking about me too, wondering if he still had my shirt on. I told myself not to read into it, not to make this into something it wasn't. But then, just as I was debating whether I should text him, there was a knock on my door. Soft, hesitant, the same as before. My pulse quickened. I opened the door, and there he was again, Daniel. This time, he didn't bother with an excuse. He just looked at me, eyes tired but hopeful, and said, "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. "Yeah, of course." He walked in like he belonged there, like last night had already set a precedent. And maybe it had. We sat down on the couch again, and before I could even ask why he was there, he sighed. "I don't know why I'm here," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "I just didn't want to be alone tonight." Something inside me softened at that, because I knew the feeling all too well. "You don't have to explain," I said quietly. "Stay as long as you want." And just like that, it became a pattern. Every few nights, there would be a knock on my door. Sometimes he'd come down with some flimsy excuse. A shirt, a charger, a cup of sugar he never actually needed. But more often than not, he'd just say what he'd said that second night. "I don't want to be alone." And I'd let him in. Always. We talked. God, we talked about everything. Dreams we never said out loud to anyone else. Regrets we carried like invisible weights. The kind of late-night conversations that feel too raw in daylight but safe under the cover of 2 a.m. silence. Sometimes we laughed until tears rolled down our cheeks. Sometimes we sat in silence, just existing near each other. And sometimes, when the world outside was still and our voices had grown soft, there were moments that felt charged, like we were standing on the edge of something neither of us dared to name. Like the time he fell asleep on my couch, head resting on my shoulder, his breath warm against my neck. I stayed frozen, not daring to move, memorizing every detail of the weight of him against me. Or the night he confessed he used to sing to himself as a kid when he couldn't fall asleep, and I asked him to sing for me. He did, softly, his voice trembling at first, then steady. And I remember thinking, I could listen to this forever. But the thing about nights like those is that they make the days harder. Because in the daylight, everything shifted back. We weren't that. Not really. We were just two neighbors, two guys who happened to talk sometimes. There were no touches in the hallway, no lingering stares when others were around. And yet, every night he showed up, the boundary between friendship and something more blurred a little further. One night, weeks into this strange rhythm of ours, I finally asked, "Why me?" We were sitting on the floor, backs against the couch, empty mugs of tea beside us. He turned his head toward me, brows furrowed. "What do you mean? You could go to anyone. You have friends, people who actually know you. Why come here?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Because with you, I don't feel like I have to pretend." The words hit me so hard I had to look away. My throat tightened, and I didn't know how to respond. But I didn't need to, because in that moment his hand found mine again. This time, deliberately, fingers curling, warm and sure. I looked at him then, and he looked at me, and for the first time, I let myself believe it wasn't just in my head. Something was happening between us. Something fragile, unspoken, but real. And I didn't know whether to lean into it or run from it. It's strange how quickly the heart learns to anticipate someone. After a while, I didn't even flinch at the sound of his knock anymore. My body already knew, like clockwork, that he'd be there, some nights earlier, some nights later, but always coming back to me. And the truth was, I started living for it. The days felt like filler, something to get through until the real part of my life began. Those quiet hours when the world was asleep, and it was just him and me. But with every passing night, the tension grew heavier, humming between us like static. There was this constant push and pull, like we were both orbiting around something neither of us dared to touch. Until the night it finally cracked. It was a Friday. I remember because I'd had a terrible week. Work was draining me dry, and I was one missed deadline away from falling apart. When his knock came, I almost didn't answer. I felt too raw, too worn down. But when I opened the door, and he stood there with that look in his eyes, the one that said I need this, I couldn't turn him away. We ended up on the couch again, only this time, neither of us had much to say. The silence wasn't awkward. It was thick, almost suffocating, but not in a way that made me want to escape. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Ever feel like you're just tired of being strong all the time? I turned to look at him. Every day. He glanced at me then, and something in his gaze lingered. A flicker, a hesitation, and before I could process it, he shifted closer. So close our knees brushed, so close I could feel the heat of his body. My pulse hammered in my ears. I didn't move, afraid the moment would vanish if I did. And then he reached up, almost nervously, fingers brushing against the collar of the shirt I was wearing. His voice was barely a whisper. "You always smell like home." I froze. The words pierced through me, carving something deep. Before I could think, before I could second guess, my hand lifted, finding his jaw. His skin was warm under my palm, stubble rough against my fingers. He leaned into the touch, just barely, and then his lips met mine. It was clumsy at first, hesitant, unsure, like we were both testing the water. But then it deepened, slow and aching, years of loneliness unraveling all at once. I didn't realize I was trembling until his hand found the back of my neck, grounding me. He tasted like mint tea and exhaustion, and God, I never wanted it to end. When we finally pulled apart, both of us breathing hard, he laughed softly, almost in disbelief. Guess I didn't just come for a shirt this time. I smiled, though my chest ached with something bigger than joy, something terrifying. Guess not. After that night, the unspoken boundary we'd been circling around shattered. We kissed again, and again, and then it wasn't just kisses. It was the way he'd curl into me on the couch, his head resting against my chest. The way his fingers would trace idle patterns on my arm while we talked. The way he'd linger in the mornings, reluctant to leave. For weeks, my apartment became more his than mine. His laughter filled the rooms. His scent clung to the fabric of my clothes. and I let myself believe foolishly that maybe, just maybe, we were building something real. But the thing about fragile things is, they break easily. Started with a shift I couldn't quite name. One night he didn't knock, then another, and when he finally came back, he seemed distracted, distant, like he was carrying something he didn't want me to see. I asked if he was okay. He said he was fine. I asked again. He changed the subject. The closeness we had, the openness, it started to fray. Little by little. One night, lying side by side, he admitted in a quiet voice, "I don't know what I'm doing." My chest tightened. "With us." He nodded, eyes fixed on the ceiling. "I wasn't looking for this. I didn't mean to. I just—" He stopped, exhaling sharply. "I don't know if I can give you what you want." The words gutted me, because what I wanted wasn't complicated. I just wanted him. The late nights, the laughter, the confessions, the weight of his hand in mine. But I didn't say that. I swallowed it down, my throat burning. Instead, I whispered, "Then what are we doing?" He didn't answer, and the silence that followed was louder than any truth he could have given me. That was the beginning of the end. The knocks came less often. The conversations grew shorter, thinner, filled with pauses where there used to be laughter. I could feel him slipping away, and no matter how tightly I held on, he kept pulling back. Until one night, there was no knock at all. And this time, he didn't come back. The silence was the hardest part. Not the sharp silence of anger, not the heavy silence of words left unsaid, but the hollow kind. The kind that comes when someone who used to fill your nights simply stops showing up. For days, I waited. Every creak in the hallway made me look toward the door, expecting that familiar soft knock. Every time my phone buzzed, my chest leapt with the possibility it was him. But it never was. Instead, my apartment became unbearably quiet again. The couch where he used to sit seemed emptier than before. The shirt he once borrowed folded neatly at the bottom of my drawer like a relic from a time I couldn't get back. I told myself not to overthink it. People drift. Maybe he got busy. Maybe he needed space. But late at night, lying awake, I knew the truth. He had made a choice. And that choice wasn't me. It felt like grieving someone who wasn't dead. And yet, the world didn't pause for my heartbreak. Work still demanded my attention. Neighbors still passed me in the hallway. Life marched on as though nothing had changed. But everything had. I thought about going upstairs, knocking on his door for once, demanding answers, asking why he started something he couldn't finish. But every time I imagined it, fear paralyzed me. What if he didn't want me there? What if the closeness I felt had only ever existed in my head? So I stayed silent, just like he did. Weeks passed. The ache dulled but never fully disappeared. It was like living with a bruise, no longer fresh, but still tender if pressed. Then one evening, as I was taking out the trash, I saw him. He was outside, leaning against the railing, talking to someone on the phone. His laugh, God, that laugh, drifted through the air, and for a second, my body reacted before my mind did. My chest tightened, my feet froze, my heart whispered his name like a prayer. But then I noticed something. The way his voice softened, the way he said, "I'll see you tomorrow," the way his face lit up with warmth I hadn't seen in weeks. And I knew he had found someone else to talk to at night, someone else to listen, someone else to sit with, someone else to fill the space I used to fill. I walked away quietly before he could see me. My throat burned, but I kept my head down, the weight of reality pressing into my bones. It was over. Whatever we had, whatever fragile, fleeting thing had blossomed between us, it was gone. But here's the cruel thing about heartbreak. It doesn't respect logic. Even when you know it's over, even when you see the truth, part of you keeps hoping. Part of you waits for the impossible. So I kept waiting, until one night, months later, there was a knock at my door. My heart leapt, reckless and desperate. I opened it, and there he was. Daniel. He looked different, tired, thinner, like the world had been wearing him down. But his eyes, those familiar eyes, softened when they landed on me. "Hey," he said quietly. I gripped the edge of the door, unsure whether to let him in or shut him out. "Hey." For a moment, neither of us moved. The silence between us was heavy, filled with everything we hadn't said. Finally, he exhaled. I'm sorry. 2 words. Small, insufficient, but they cracked something open inside me anyway. Sorry for what? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He winced. For disappearing. For not explaining. He trailed off, running a hand through his hair. For making you believe in something I wasn't ready to give. The honesty in his voice was disarming. It hurt, but it was real. And after months of silence, real felt like oxygen. I stepped aside. Come in. He hesitated, then crossed the threshold, just like that first night. Only this time, the air was heavier, older, weighed down with all we'd been through. We sat on the couch, the same couch that had held our laughter, our confessions, our first kiss. The memories pressed in on me like ghosts. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said softly. I didn't know what I wanted. And instead of being honest, I ran. I swallowed hard. You could have told me. I know. His voice broke. But I was scared. Scared of what this meant. Scared of what I was feeling. Scared of needing someone as much as I needed you. The words lodged in my chest. Because I had needed him too. Maybe more than I'd ever admitted. We sat in silence, both of us staring at the floor, the weight of the past pressing down on us. Finally, I asked the question that had haunted me for months. Why now? Why come back? He lifted his eyes to mine, and for the first time in a long time, there was no hesitation in them. Because I can't stop thinking about you, he whispered. Because every night I spend anywhere else feels wrong. Because when I'm with you it feels like home, and I don't want to keep running from that. My chest ached. God, I wanted to believe him. I wanted to reach out, to fall back into the comfort of his arms, to pretend the months of silence never happened. But heartbreak changes you, teaches you caution. It makes you question promises, even the ones you want most to believe. So I just sat there, torn between hope and fear, between longing and self-preservation. And I realized that whatever happened next, whether we rebuilt something or let it go for good, this was the moment that would decide it. I wish I could tell you that I knew exactly what to say in that moment, that I had the wisdom, the clarity, the perfect words to either forgive him or let him go. But the truth is, I just sat there, staring at him, my heart caught somewhere between the memory of his laughter and the ache of his absence. He shifted nervously, running his thumb along the seam of his jeans. Say something, he whispered, like the silence was breaking him. I swallowed hard. I don't know if I can trust you again. His shoulders sagged, but he didn't look away. I know, and I don't expect you to. Not right away. I want the chance to try. The sincerity in his voice shook me. Because I'd wanted that too. Even through the heartbreak, the waiting, the silence, I hadn't stopped wanting him. But wanting and trusting aren't the same thing. Do you even know what you want? I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. Because last time, you said you didn't. And I can't. My voice cracked. I can't go through that again. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on mine. I know what I want now. I want you. Not just the late-night talks or the comfort of being here when I'm lonely. I want all of it. You. My breath hitched. God, how easy it would have been to give in right then, to let his words patch over the cracks in me. But I couldn't forget the nights I waited by the door for a knock that never came. So instead, I asked the question I'd been afraid of. And if you get scared again? If you change your mind? He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them with a steadiness I hadn't seen before. Then I'll tell you. I won't disappear. I promise. Promises. They sound so easy when spoken, but I'd learned they could unravel just as easily. Still, something in me softened. Maybe it was the way his voice shook when he said it, or the way his eyes glistened like he was fighting back tears. Or maybe it was just that part of me, the part that had always stubbornly hoped for him, refused to let go. I let out a shaky breath. If I let you back in, it can't be halfway. I can't be your secret midnight comfort anymore. I need more than that. His voice was firm this time. You won't be halfway. You'll be everything. Silence stretched between us, heavy and electric. Then, slowly, I reached for his hand. His fingers closed around mine instantly, warm and familiar, and I felt the months of distance collapse in that single touch. He exhaled, relief flooding his face. "Thank you," he whispered, but I shook my head. "Don't thank me yet. You still have to prove it." And he nodded without hesitation. "I will." What followed wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't easy. Rebuilding trust never is. At first, it felt fragile, like walking on cracked ice, afraid of slipping through. He'd show up more often, but part of me braced for the moment he'd vanish again. He'd say something sweet, and I'd wonder if he meant it or if it was just the warmth of the night speaking. But slowly, carefully, he showed me. He started coming over in the daylight, not just at midnight. He texted me in the middle of the day, not just when he felt lonely. He introduced me to his friends, not as some vague neighbor, but as someone who mattered. Every little step chipped away at the wall I'd built around myself. And somewhere in that slow rebuilding, we found something new. Not just the comfort of two insomniacs sharing late-night conversations. Not just the accidental intimacy of borrowed shirts and shared silences. But the beginnings of something steadier. Something real. I remember one afternoon in particular, we were cooking together something mundane, spaghetti on a Sunday. He stood behind me, arms wrapped around my waist as I stirred the sauce. And he said, so casually it nearly undid me, "This feels like home." I froze, spatula in hand, his words echoing in my chest. Home. Because that was what I'd always wanted to be for him. And hearing him say it out loud, it was like every ache, every doubt, every lonely night waiting by the door was worth it. Of course, we still stumbled. He still had moments where fear crept in, where he'd grow quiet and distant. And I had moments where my insecurities screamed louder than his reassurances. But the difference was, this time we talked through it. This time he stayed. And in the staying, I learned something too, that love isn't always about grand gestures or flawless beginnings. Sometimes it's about two broken people choosing, again and again, to stay when it would be easier to leave. It's about the late-night knock on the door that changes everything. It's about a borrowed shirt that becomes the start of a story. It's about learning that even when heartbreak cracks you open, sometimes hope still finds its way back in. Looking back now, I don't think I'll ever forget the night he first showed up at my door, or the nights after when we talked until dawn, or even the silence in between, the ache of his absence, the sharp reminder of what it means to want someone you're afraid to lose. Because all of it, the laughter, the heartbreak, the waiting, the returning, it shaped us. And maybe that's the truest kind of love story. Not perfect, not smooth, not without pain, but real. The kind where someone says they just need a shirt and ends up staying in your life far longer than you ever imagined.